Well, good afternoon. I hope that I'm live and that you can hear me. A very warm welcome to you to this afternoon session. We're going to talk about resilience. My name is Kiaran Weil, and I'm a retired dentist and a Royal Voluntary Service volunteer. I started doing check-in and chat at the beginning of COVID. And then from there, I went on to do the COVID vaccination clinics. So I know that a lot of people listening are volunteering in so many different capacities, and it's a real privilege to be talking to you today. I've done other volunteering as well. I have taught out in East Africa for the last 15 years. I've taught dentistry, and in this country, I've both taught dentistry and behavioral sciences. So that's just to give you an idea of my background. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about resilience. And, one of them, I've met such amazing and wonderful people when I've been volunteering, both out in Africa and round the corner at the local pharmacy when we're volunteering there. And it's been a real joy. But one of the things that we need to be able to do in order to be volunteering and being of service in this way is that we need to be resilient ourselves. It's no good being they always say on the plane, put your own oxygen mask on first before you try to help somebody else. And really, that's what this talk is about today, is how can each one of us be more resilient? How can we be kinder to one another at a time when everybody needs help? How can we communicate well, kindly, and with compassion, having compassion for those that we're serving? Whatever your job is, if you're chatting to someone on the phone or getting their groceries or helping them in a clinic, how can we have compassion for the people that we're helping to look after, for the people we're working with? We're all volunteers. Who's responsible for having a nice atmosphere at work? We all are. We're just all working together. And then how do we have compassion for ourselves, which very often volunteers overlook? So what is resilience? Resilience is this amazing ability to be able to bounce back, to deal with the problems and challenges that we have in our day-to-day lives. It can be just daily things, or it can be in the sort of high-stress situations that many of you are facing. Resilience is about recognizing when you're stressed. Do you have a really good understanding of what happens to you when you get stressed? I have kids, I have grandkids. Nobody knows you as well as them. Your kids always know when you're getting stressed. People at work may not, but your children for sure do. Why? Because they know you so well, and they can see those little telltale signs that you're a little bit more irritable, or maybe you go quiet. We all have different ways. And so being resilient is about developing your personal coping mechanisms. There are general things that make us all resilient. You may already be great at some of them. So how can we get better, even better at being resilient? Being resilient is not about being unaffected by stress. People sometimes think, oh, I'm okay, I'm not stressed. That's not what resilience is. Resilience is recognizing that you're being stressed and doing something about it. We're not stuck the way we are. You're not born with a certain amount of resilience that you carry through your whole life. You can change it. It's not static. We can become more resilient. So I'd really encourage you, if you've got a pen and paper, because it's so personal, it's not just about what I think is right. It's what you think you need in your life that will help you to be better able to cope with the challenges that you're facing. So anything that really appeals to you, just go ahead and write it down, and save it for later and look at how can I make this a part of my life? So resilience it improves our emotional and mental welfare. So it's a wonderful quality to have. But we're not expected to be superhuman. One of the most important things about being resilient is knowing when to ask for help. And I would say, when you're talking to a group of volunteers are the last people to think usually that they are the ones that might need help. We think that we're there to help and support other people, but we're not expected to be superhuman. And it's a sign of resilience. It's a sign of emotional and emotional maturity to be able to say to somebody, actually, I need some help here, please. So, let's not be afraid as volunteers to say, actually, I need help. So this is a good question to ask yourself. How good are you at asking for help? Do you recognize when you need it? I mean, I have to say, hand on heart, I've usually gone past the point when I need help before I ask for it. It's challenging, to realize if I'm a little bit more grumpy and irritable when somebody asks me to do something, chances are I've gone a little bit past the point where I'm doing too much. So, it's really worth recognizing that even though we're there to help and support others, we need to know when to ask for help ourselves. So there's lots of wonderful, wonderful things that you can do. And these are from, there's lots and lots of research worldwide that's gone into this. So I'm not just making it up off the top of my head. And sometimes it seems so simple. You think, really, that's all I need to do? These strategies are known to work. So the most important thing about being resilient is to accept that change is a part of life. Boy, we know it is. We absolutely know that change is a part of life, but can we really accept that? Very often what happens is that change makes us uncomfortable. All they have to do is change the direction you cue for something for people to start to get irritated and feel uncomfortable. As human beings, we don't like change, and some personalities find it even more difficult. So it's a good question to ask yourself, do I like change, or do I kind of resent it and feel uncomfortable? We all feel uncomfortable with a certain amount of change. So if you want to be a resilient person, what we need to do is to learn to accept change. There's no doubt at all. Somebody just said to me the other day something about, this used to be so easy. You just call them up over the phone and paid your money, and now we've got to do all of it online. So yes, you're quite right. Change can make things more difficult. There's no doubt about it. But if we want to be resilient, it's that recognition that resisting change will absolutely, definitely make things worse for you. So when things, even, I don't know, I mean, one of the things that I've been doing is going to the COVID vaccination clinics as a steward. And I don't know if any of you have done that particular job. It's different every place you go. So the first one you go, you don't know what you're doing. You go and you do your shift, and now you have some idea. You go on to the next place. They have a whole different way of doing it. How good are you at accepting right off the bat, they're doing this differently? How can I do this? How can I do it their way? It isn't always helpful to come in and say, that's not how we did it in the last place. Every clinic has different criteria. So even though there's a lot the same, there's a lot different as well. Change can be really overwhelming for us. So breaking things down into little bite-sized pieces is incredibly helpful. Whether it's something as simple as doing, tidying a cupboard out. You look in the cupboard and it's a mess and you think, no, I'll close the door again. I'll do it another day. So breaking it into bite-sized pieces and thinking, right, what's most important to do here? You might be looking for something, and you can just start taking one thing out and deciding, what am I going to do with this? Break it down into bite-sized pieces. The whole thing can be very overwhelming. One of the other things that causes us problems in terms of coping with the stresses of life is that sometimes there's nothing you can do to change it. And I think that's something we've all learned in this COVID situation. We find ourselves in this position, and as individuals, most of us have no influence over this big picture that's happening to us. The one thing that we absolutely do have is that we can choose how we react to what's happening. And so this is part of what makes one person resilient and another person not. So one person is finding ways of adapting and accepting what's happening, while other people are resenting and resisting it. So what are we responsible for that's going to make our lives easy? Is we're responsible for our choice about how we respond to this. You get to pick. You get to be mad or angry, or you get to look for a new solution. And then this is another one. And I think that this is something that volunteers, we're usually really good at it, but we can always improve, is to recognize that our response to what's happening impacts everyone else. So if you go into your volunteer situation, and even if things are challenging, if you have a positive attitude to it, that affects everybody else. If you go in saying, oh, I can't believe we've got to do it this way, then everybody else is like, oh, I know. But if you go in saying things like, oh, okay, that's what they want us to do, well, let's give it a go. Let's see how we can get that done. We impact everybody else around us. So this is, I would say, this is the number one thing that helps us to be resilient, is to recognize change is happening all the time, and you get to pick how you respond to it. So this is the second thing, how to be true to your values. And I'd say that's something that everybody here that's listening shares. You all have values that have caused you in a time when people need help to go, what can I do? What can I do to help? So you have somewhere a belief that you have something that you can offer to other people. And these values are really important to us. Without them, and this is true of everybody, whether they know it or not, if you don't live true to your values, you feel like something's missing in your life. And so knowing what your values are and being true to them, even with a little simple task, if nobody else is doing it well, if it's important to you, we can do it well. And that gives us a stability when everything else around is thrown up in the air. Everything's new. Nobody knows what you're doing. Your values aren't new. Your values are stable, and you can bring that stability and confidence to everything that you do by sticking to your values. And so this is a good question to ask yourself. What are the 3 most important values to you? And how can you bring those into either your volunteering or your day-to-day life, or, your relationship with family and friends? So what are your 3 core values? Who would have thought that there's massive amounts of research being done on gratitude? And the research shows time and time again that being grateful helps us all to accomplish more in our lives. And this is a simple way to do it, is to think of the people who've helped you. If you think back, it might be somebody who helped you yesterday, or somebody that helped you when you were a child, or, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Recognizing that we're in this together, and that many people have helped us on our way, and take the time to thank them and appreciate them. One of the things that does is it lifts our spirits, and it raises our own resilience. It changes your view of yourself. You are much more a part of a whole instead of being a separate outside of it. And expressing gratitude really gives more fulfillment and meaning to your life. And I don't know if you're familiar with the 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous. That's one of the practices that they do a lot of. Anytime that you feel down, write a list of 10 things you're grateful for in your life. And you think, well, really, is that going to make a big difference? How's that going to make me more resilient? And I would say, don't underestimate it. Try it. Because one of the things that does is it changes you from this idea of somebody who's a victim of difficult circumstances to somebody who has wonderful things happening in their lives. So being grateful for something simple, sometimes it'll make you smile, just something very simple that you can really appreciate. So we're all dealing with a crisis at the moment, and I think that one of the things that's fascinating is that when I've traveled, when I first went out to Africa working, the thing that struck me the most was that the people who went out there to volunteer were so often the people who'd had to deal with very difficult circumstances in their own lives. And one of the things that does for people is they begin to realize that working through a crisis changes you. Crises and difficult circumstances, they're inevitable. They happen to all of us. Nobody is exempt. Sometimes people go cruising through life. It looks like everything's easy peasy. But for all of us at different times in our life, we have difficulties to deal with. And so what happens to people who go through difficult times is that they begin to realize, I can do this. I know how to do this. It's normal to feel, it's completely normal to feel overwhelmed. It's okay. You don't have to change that. You don't have to fix it. But what you can do is draw on the knowledge and experience and support from other people. And what happens is people who've been through a crisis realize how nice it was that nurse just put an arm around them or spoke kindly to them, or the person behind the counter who brought them a cup of tea. Little things that make a difference. And you begin to realize, oh my goodness, that is such a huge help. I'd like to be a person who's able to offer that to others. So again, it's this idea, you may not have a choice on the crises that happen in your life, but you do get to make a choice about what you do about it, and it will change you. And I'll bet that for every person listening, you have a story of what's happened in your life that's caused you to be someone who wants to help. And, as I sort of mentioned in that, what happens to us when we go through things in life is that you learn a lot about yourself. You really do. You learn a lot about yourself. And you begin to realize, actually, I don't want to be the same as I was when I was a kid. I want to grow and change and be a different person. I want to be able to do the things that are important to me. So sometimes we learn from the things that we expect to happen, things that are planned. And sometimes we learn from these crises, the unexpected and unplanned things. But we can grow at any time as long as we're open to it. And one of the things that helps us to develop and also to be able to respond well in a crisis is knowing what your signature strengths are. If you were to ask a family member or a friend or somebody you worked with, and in fact, I highly recommend you do it, ask them, what's your strength? And think, how could I do this more? I have this strength. For some reason, you were either born with it or through your life, hopefully through your life, you've developed it more and more. It means that now you're a person who has a huge amount to offer in that area of your strength. So because we're learning all the time, this was just a question I thought you might find interesting to answer for yourself. I'm retiring age. I've had a long, career, a working life, and I've done a lot of volunteering. But I can tell you that beyond any shadow of a doubt, I've learned a lot from volunteering in this COVID crisis. I went to one of the very first clinics that I went to. Was such a wonderful experience. And I really stopped and looked at it and thought, why is this place, why am I enjoying being here so much? And it was because the pharmacist, he was young and he was quiet, so he wasn't making a big fuss of people, but he was always there. He was always walking around. If there was rubbish on the floor, he picked it up and put it in the bin. If you had a question for him, he always had an answer. He was never too busy to talk to you. The administrator in charge of that clinic, if she had some spare time, she'd make coffee for the volunteers. Who does that? Normally it's the other way around. But what happened is that working in that clinic, for me as a volunteer, made me feel like my time was really valued and appreciated it, and it made me want to do more. And I thought, oh my goodness, so when somebody comes into this environment, the fact that everybody's trying to make it better, everybody wanted the patients to have a good experience, made it a wonderful place to be. And I asked some of the other volunteers, and they were like, oh yeah, this is the best. Somebody said, yeah, well, we drive like, about 35 miles to get here to work in this particular clinic. Why? Because the people in charge cared so much about the quality of care, not just for the patients, but for the volunteers, whether they be the vaccinators or the stewards or out in the car park, and also for the people who worked there who were being paid. This idea that everybody deserved the support, and it made it a real pleasure. So what are your strengths? What are you bringing us into that situation? This is what makes you resilient. You'll feel so good at the end of the day if you bring your strengths to whatever it is you're doing. So what else can we do to be resilient? And one of those is to be hopeful. If you come in, it's like, oh, moan, groan, everything's negative, then we don't have that resilient quality. Resilient comes from changing your negative patterns and thinking and feeling fed up to having a positive outcome, having a positive outlook. And there are wonderful ways to do that. And so, the question to you is, are you an optimistic, hopeful person? And can you do that when things are rough? Can you turn around any negative thoughts and feelings and turn them into something more positive? And one of the best ways to do that is to think of yourself both as someone who gives and receives help. Very often people who are givers forget that this is a whole dynamic. For everyone who gives something, somebody else has to receive. And yes, you may be a person who gives more than they receive, but it's a balance there, and it makes a huge difference to your resilience. You need to be able to receive as well as give. And that sounds like something that could be from from one of the faiths, but the truth of it is this is from research. This is from worldwide research, that you being able to receive, whether it be praise or help or kindness or practical help, is as important as giving. A lot of the traditions say it's better to give than it is to receive, but it doesn't say don't receive. You still have to be good at that and do it graciously. So how amazing that by letting somebody do something kind for you, you're becoming more resilient. So the next thing is making connections. And we know that connections are vital for well-being. It's interesting that, we're all aware of this. It's not something probably you think about very often, but we know that solitary confinement is considered to be the most severe and damning punishment. So, it's bad enough you're already in jail. We want to make your life even more miserable. What can we do to you to make life worse? We can put you alone, away from connections. And so resilient people have connection. And so this is just good to think about. Who supports you? Are there individuals in your life who support you? Are there organizations, sources of inspiration and moral support? Think about it. Who supports you? And remember to put a little bit of extra effort into developing, maintaining, appreciating and valuing those connections with those people and individuals that support you. And then to recognize how important it is to make connections with other people. Very often you're going in somewhere, you don't know anybody, you don't know the person. You might be going grocery shopping for somebody or taking them to the hospital or dropping things off. Who knows what jobs you're doing? Are you good at making those connections? And very often as a volunteer, we need to gel as a team. You very often are working with somebody you've never met before, maybe a whole group. You've never known any of these people before. So we need to be good at making connections, because otherwise you're going to feel uncomfortable. And stepping out of our comfort zone just to make a connection with another person helps us to have a better day, helps us to be resilient. So who supports you? What can we do to develop these relationships? And what do you give to the relationship to people who support you? And what do you take? Do you have a nice sense of this give and take in those relationships? So one of the other ways to be resilient is to move forward. Standing still and being stuck is really hard. And moving towards your goal. And in a way, this looks a lot more at life, what are your goals in your life, maybe at work, and understanding that you need to have a really clear idea of where it is you're headed. You need to have a really practical approach, and you need to test your goals and say, well, can I actually do this? Physically, mentally, emotionally, am I in a place that I can do this? So really commit to improving how clear your goal is, because without a good, clear goal, we don't succeed. We're not resilient. We don't move forward. We get stuck. And this is a really small story. One of my daughters, when she was a little kid, I asked what she wanted for Christmas, and she said, it's hard to believe. She said, I want a purple towel, and I want my name on it, and I want it to have a bear on it. And I want the bear to have a real red bow. That's very, very specific. What else would you like for Christmas? Nothing. What do you want from Father Christmas? No, nothing. What else would you? Nothing. She only wanted one thing. She had a very, very clear goal. I have other kids, they want a bike and a television in their bedroom and, clothes and books, who knows what, computers, games. She only wanted one thing. What do you think she got? She got exactly what she asked for. I had to make it, but she got exactly what she asked for. That's what it means to have a clear goal. And so for anything that we do, you're much more resilient if you have a clear picture and a good plan. I would say that out of everything we're talking about today, this is probably one of the most important, is to nurture a positive view of yourself. Life isn't always predictable. We know that, but still when problems happen, it comes as a surprise to us. Even though life proves time and time and time and time again that what we thought was going to happen didn't happen. And so how do you deal personally with a problem? And it depends very often whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty person. And some personalities tend to be more glass half full, but you're not stuck with that. We can change. We can have a much more positive view of what's happening. We can, instead of thinking, well, that you're never going to be able to do that. You can't, that old sort of, you can't get there from here attitude, which is that half empty, to, well, I'm not sure what to do here, but let's have a look and see what our options are. How can you shift it just into a slightly more positive view? And what happens then is that you begin to have a much more positive view of yourself and your contribution to what's happening. And I love this quote: to the voices in our heads that tell us we aren't good enough, do be quiet. Shh, hush. We don't want to hear that. And to recognize that old voice in your head isn't you. Sometimes it's your parents, sometimes it's your teachers, sometimes it's just the attitude of society. But we don't have to live by that. You are good enough. Absolutely, you're good enough. So, worth thinking about. And so how important is it for us to take care of ourselves? And I just want to say, I'll be 70 in a couple of months. And I've been working at the COVID vaccination clinics. And I did one about 2 weeks ago, and it was a 7-hour shift with a 20-minute break. And at the end of that shift, I realized, actually, I can't do that anymore. It made me really sad, because I still think of myself as a kid, and I still think I can do pretty much anything I want. But for me to realize that a 7-hour shift standing pretty much for 7 hours is really hard for my body. I've 2 hip replacements, and it was hard. And so it's not that I can't still volunteer. Absolutely, I'm committed to doing that, but I can take care of myself as well, which means that for me, it just means looking for a shift. Probably 5 hours is a limit for me. So for me, it's looking for a shift that I can do 5 hours instead of 7. So how good are you at taking care of yourself? Do you have a balance in your life? And this is probably one of the best ways to be resilient, is to look at, if you're still working, how much time do you spend at your work? Does that take all of your energy? Do you spend some time on taking care of your own health? Or are you so busy taking care of everybody else that you aren't taking care of yourself? Do you have enough time to spend with your family and friends? I know that these are exceptional times, and you may feel like, well, this is something I can sacrifice for the time, and maybe you can't even see them anyway because of the restrictions. And that's a choice, but it can't be long term. When it comes down to it, I don't think any of our family and friends would forgive us if we put work or our health, put them in front of our health. We need to think, where is the balance for us? And do you have time in your life for recreation and rest? It's as important as family and friends and health and work, a time that you get to relax and what that means to you. So this is another question, if you've got your pen and paper there, to write down for yourself. The idea is at the end of this, you'll have something written down that you can look back and go, oh, yes, that's what I was going to do. I don't know. We're all different. Which of these do you feel like you need more of in your life to be able to really be taking good care of yourself? One of the things that causes us the most stress in life is decision making. And so the research shows that making decisions allows us to move forward and feel better for the most part. That when we're stuck in the middle of a decision making, we are just going back and forth, and we, trying to weigh up the pros and cons and not moving forward. And so it puts us in a stressful situation. And so taking decisive action is really important. Right down at the bottom here, number 5, it says, no decision is usually the worst option. The longer you avoid making the decision, not always, but almost always, you're putting off moving forward. And it's really important. We live in a society that tells us that our thinking is better, that our thoughts are more reliable than our emotions. But unfortunately, in decision making, that's not true. You need to have both sides of your brain working together. So you have to pay attention to that emotional part of the brain that says, oh, wait a minute, there's something not right about this. Or yes, this is what I want to do. I love this. Your rational brain will help you to work around that about why you really want to do it, or why you have a feeling something's not right. But it's having those two sides of your brain work together. But if you don't make a decision, it's really frustrating for everybody. So one of the things that's helpful to make a choice is have a think about what would happen if you do make the decision and what will happen if you don't. And that can sometimes help you find out why you're struggling decision making. What's stopping me here? What's stopping me making a decision? So those are the main ways that we become more resilient. So, just looking back at maybe you've scrubbed things, or just a few of the things that I've said, just think of 3 things that you could do to be more resilient. And how can you share it with other people so that they can support you? You're supporting everybody else. Maybe you say to your family, oh, it's really important that I spend time with you. Can we be sure that we all eat dinner together on a particular evening? Ask for them for that support that you need. Are you taking care of yourself? Do you need to get some exercise? You're not taking care of your own health. You're going to make sure that you put a walk in on whenever you feel that's important. And then just this idea that, do you recognize the importance of each member of your team, your family, your volunteer family, the people you're working with? Do you recognize that everybody's role is equally important? And I would say that's another thing that I've learned in COVID. I'm a dentist and I'm used to being in charge when I'm in charge. And I could have worked as a vaccinator, but I didn't. I'm working as a steward. When I'm working as a steward, I have no less value than when I'm working as a dentist. It's the same. Doesn't matter what you do. It's real. And that's why I loved this clinic where the pharmacist and the administrator are so wonderful, is that they recognize that nobody is better than anyone else. Everybody's job contributes to the whole. And when we value everybody else, it changes everyone's experience. So, to become more resilient, one of the main things we need is emotional intelligence. I was going to spend some time on this, but time's flying by, so I'm just going to mention it. What is emotional intelligence? And I would say that as a group, chances are you have quite a, if you were to look at a cross-section of society, that this is a group that's particularly good, because unless you have a pretty good emotional intelligence, you probably wouldn't have decided to be a volunteer. You would have just thought, oh, somebody else can do that. But usually what's happened is that you've seen people struggling and you want to help. So emotional intelligence is knowing how you feel. What emotions are you feeling? It's about empathy. What emotions somebody else feeling right now? Other people, very often somebody will sound like they're angry, but if you're paying attention, you realize that's not really how they're feeling. They're mainly scared. Scared people act angry. How good are you at recognizing what another person's going through? How good are you at being able to control your emotions and reactions in any given moment? I think we've been very lucky. We've rarely had somebody coming into the clinics who was upset, but occasionally it happens. Can you control your emotions and reactions when somebody's being unkind to you? When things are difficult and somebody's not treating you well, can you still manage to be genuinely interested in that person and their problem? And when you're doing a job, how do you interpret it? This is strange that this would seem like an indication of emotional intelligence, but sometimes we think that a job is difficult to do. Maybe it's because we're not very good at it or we don't know much about it. Sometimes we avoid jobs. Like it says, your job's on your to-do list because you think it's going to be too difficult. And then when you actually come and try to do it, you realize, oh, it wasn't that bad. And so this interpretation of the jobs that you've got to do is like, well, if it's a difficult job, ask someone for help, ask somebody for advice, but don't avoid it. And that's what an emotionally intelligent person does. They say, oh, I've got this job to do. I think it's going to be difficult. An emotionally immature person goes, I think it's going to be difficult. I'll put it off until it causes problems. Instead of saying, well, let's see what I can do with it. So what can we do to become more emotionally intelligent? And one of the best things that you can do is to learn to be assertive. And I don't know what that means to you. Sometimes people think assertiveness has slightly negative connotations, that it's like, oh, assertive, you might be trying to get your own way, but that's not what it is at all. Assertiveness is being able to say what you think. It's being able to say how you feel. It's being able to say what you want or what you would prefer. And it's being able to do it in a straightforward way. And we all know the difference. You know, if somebody says to you, how are you? And you say, I'm fine, chances are you're going to believe them. But if somebody says to you, how are you? And you go, well, I'm fine. You're not. Or if they say, how are you? And you go, I'm fine. It means I'm not fine and I don't have time to talk to you. So being assertive, so saying what you think, you might say, I'm fine. It's not really the truth. It's about being straightforward. And someone who's assertive, if that's all you have to be able to do, say what you think, say how you feel, what you want or what you prefer, and be really straightforward about it. Someone who's assertive is able to balance their needs and wants with the needs and wants of other people. And what a great thing for somebody who wants to help to be able to do. You know, you don't want to be pushing everybody and bossing everybody around, being aggressive, and you don't want to be a pushover. What you want to do is to have that nice, wonderful balance. And you can see where those circles overlap. That little assertive bit isn't big. It's not big. Most people, when they get stressed, either become aggressive and start bossing everyone around, or they become passive, which means they do what anyone tells them without speaking up. You know, that's a bit generalizing, but it gives you the idea. So being assertive is a wonderful way to communicate. What you're doing is saying you've got respect for yourself, you're willing to stand up for what you believe and what you think, but you also show respect for others and you're willing to work with them. So what you're saying is, nowhere there does it say telling people that they're wrong. There's nothing about telling anybody else they're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. No, it's just you being able to say this, well, this is what I think, or this is how I feel, or, this is what I would prefer to do here if that's possible. Doesn't mean you get what you want. It means that you can ask for it. So, and very often, if you're more passive or assertive, whatever it is you want to tell people, or say to them, gets lost because they're reacting to the way you answer, the way you deliver it. Anyway, I'm going to skip forward here because I've got way too much material, so I do apologize. We'll just skip through this, or maybe we'll leave this one. Being assertive is about being a grown-up. It's about taking responsibility for your thoughts and your words and your actions. It's not getting what you want, it's knowing what you want and just being able to say it. When people are, oh, well, what would you like to eat? Oh, no, whatever you like, whatever is fine for me. That's not helpful. Why not be able to say, well, actually, I'd really like pizza, and then somebody else to say, oh, I don't like pizza. Do you mind if we have Chinese food? Absolutely. You said your bit. You said, I'd like pizza. Yeah, maybe you didn't get it, but at least you said it. And then the next time people might say to you, oh, let's have pizza. You wanted that last time. It's a lot more clear and straightforward. Just being able to say what your preference is makes life easier for you and for everyone else. Who would have thought that? Just being able to say, oh, when people are saying, who's going to do what's happening here? For you to be able to say, well, I'd prefer to do this station if that's all right, but I'm happy to swap later if somebody wants to do it as well. It just makes life easy. So I thought we'd end with this. I was at a meeting, it was a worldwide meeting, and they were talking about compassion as being the most vital quality required for healthcare workers in the post-COVID world. And this is research from, I think it's from Harvard and from King's College in London. And they've done some joint work on this whole idea of compassion and how important it is. And I thought that because this is a group who are so motivated by compassion, you know, you wouldn't be doing this. If you had no compassion, you wouldn't have stepped forward when somebody said, we need help. So it was just a slightly different view that I thought you might just enjoy. So what is compassion? It's that wish to see others free from suffering. And it begins with empathy. And I think that, you know, people say, oh, well, so-and-so is very empathetic and somebody's not very empathetic. But the interesting thing is we're all empathetic. It's a basic response. It's this ability to, they call it feeling into. It's that somehow you can feel this other person's emotions and you can tell that they're suffering. And it feels as if it's happening to you. So somehow you're having that experience of their feeling. And so much is it universal that it's a basic response found in all animals, and particularly in elephants, dolphins, dogs, and the great apes, the chimpanzees and gorillas. But empathy is just the doorway. Empathy is the gateway to compassion. And so compassion is so the animals have empathy, but compassion is a step forward. It's empathy without confusing other feelings with your own. And this is where we get into trouble. What happens is that, you know, you're with somebody and they're suffering and now you're suffering too. Whereas compassion is that movement from suffering what they're suffering to recognizing that's them, this is me. And I have a desire or a readiness to help anyone who's suffering. And so when you're off to work, you know, it's this idea that you've come to help. You're not come to go down with the ship. You're not coming to feel as bad as they feel. You're coming because you have this desire to help. And the recognition, this is part of this research, you can only have compassion if you take care of yourself. Because otherwise what happens is you walk in, you feel how bad they feel, and now you feel that bad, and now both of you feel awful. So, and I know people talk about it, you know, they talk about compassion fatigue, you know, where people are like, oh, I gave already, stop asking me, I gave already. But they're saying that there's no such thing as compassion fatigue. We're miscalling it. It's really empathy fatigue. And that empathy fatigue was like, I can't bear to feel this bad anymore. And I have to say, I married an American and lived in California for 17 years. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I really, my husband was American, my kids are American. I loved it there, but nobody does compassion like we do it here. You know, when they had that earthquake, the tsunami in Banda Aceh, that Christmas Boxing Day, I think it was, the public in the UK gave more than the US government within about a period of a week. Why? Because we are a compassionate nation and we don't get empathy fatigue. You know, I mean, well, pardon me, we do get empathy fatigue, but we don't get compassion fatigue because that desire and readiness to help, we do what we can when we can. So, you know, it's a real privilege to work with you all. Compassion protects us from burnout. If you're empathetic, you can get burnout, but compassion saves you. That desire to help shifts you from feeling their pain to being yourself. And the research shows it protects you even if you don't act on it. You know, maybe you see something and you think, oh, I'd like to donate to that. And then you realize, oh, I don't have enough money to donate to that. But you might just wish the people well. You don't have to do anything. Just wanting to help is enough to help to protect you. And so the research shows compassion helps those, obviously, who are on the receiving end of it. And I'll tell you what, there'll be stories we haven't heard yet of the compassion that's been extended to our family members who've been in hospital by, compassion extended by volunteers to healthcare workers who are struggling. There's going to be amazing stories of the people who've been the beneficiaries of this compassion. But compassion also helps those of us who express it. And it helps those who see it. And when you think about it, if you watch something on the television and somebody does something that's a really beautiful act of compassion, you know that it inspires you. So compassion, it helps everyone. So it's worth thinking about, what does it look like? What does compassion look like? How do we express it? We express it every time we say to somebody, what can I do for you? How can I help? Just being kind, being dependable, showing up when you said you were going to. When somebody's struggling, instead of looking at them going, oh, for heaven's sakes, that best you can do is to go over and say, can I help? That's what compassion looks like. It's listening, maybe listening when you're tired yourself. So how do you like people to express compassion to you? What does it mean to you? Don't be afraid to let your family and your friends know how they can support you. And ask other people. We assume that everybody wants what we want. Not true. You want to know how you can help somebody? Ask them, how can I help you? And it helps dramatically when colleagues empathize with one another. So if you're in the healthcare profession, you know what that's like. Reach out to one another. We can't express compassion to others if you don't have it for yourself. So remember, what is compassion? It's that reaching out, that desire to help someone who's suffering. How can you do that for yourself? It's essential, not selfish. And I think that sometimes when people want to help, they think it's selfish to spend time taking care of themselves, but you're only doing it. If this is the only reason you do it, it's worth it. If you're doing it just to be able to help some more. And I love this little drawing. Why do we need to be gentle with people? Whatever job you're doing in terms of volunteering, if you look at it, that's what somebody's life is, that long line. And what you know about is that tiny little bit. You have no idea that one person standing in front of you at the check-in desk who looks like they're having a tough day. You don't know what people are going through or what they've been through in the past, what burdens them in their daily lives. And I can say that, one of my daughters was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. And I just want to say she's fine. She recovered, even though at the time they didn't think she would. But I used to go to work and people would be saying, oh, I'm not really sure that I like the color of this filling. What burdened me in my daily life was that my daughter was dying. You don't say that to somebody. You don't know what the person standing in front of you is going through, what happened in their childhood or as an adult, or what they have to go home to at the end of the day. Life may look wonderful, but we don't know. Life is hard and we all have baggage, but we can still be kind and gentle and compassionate with each other. And I think that we as volunteers are in a unique position. Yes, it's great that you man the lines and it's great that you do the shopping and do all those kind of things, but I can tell you beyond any shadow of a doubt that when you're kind, a kind word, a gentle touch, and compassion, those are the things that really make the difference. And how amazing that it's only when we acknowledge our own suffering that we can truly develop compassion for others. So somebody sent me this and I thought it was beautiful. And I think it's a great thing for us to all think of. You can't fix things. When someone's broken, don't try to fix them. You can't. When someone's hurting, don't attempt to take away their pain. You can't. Instead, walk beside them in their hurt. because sometimes what people need is simply to know they're not alone. So I really encourage you, take something from this, do something to take care of yourself so that you're strong enough and whole enough and well enough to be that person who can say a kind word to someone else. Because taking care of yourself isn't me first, it's just me too. And these are the sort of wonderful things you can do. Physically, we know these things. A good diet, not so much sugar, no smoking, moderate alcohol, regular exercise that you enjoy. Those 4 things are the main causes of disease that kills in this country. If you use a lot of coffee, it masks your body's message to you saying, you've done enough, you're tired, it's time to rest. So coffee, that caffeine burst is for the occasional time that you really, really need it, not to live on so that you're masking your body's tiredness. Taking the time to get some good sleep. Taking a deep breath when you need it. We say it to people who we're helping, but we forget to remind ourselves to do it. Stay hydrated. Mentally and emotionally. Get support from your family and friends if you can. Ask for help, whether it's from family or friend, from religious support. Don't be afraid to get counseling if you need it. It's well worth it. Don't be afraid to talk openly about your feelings if you're angry or stressed or worried. Talk to a friend. Do something fun at least once a week. We need it, You need it. Recognize when you're not coping well and have a plan in mind. Realizing you're getting stressed and say, right, I'm going to have a day off and I'm not going to do anything. This Saturday is just for me. Try to stay positive. Don't be a slave to technology. If you need to rest, rest. Technology or computers, screens all the time, you're neither asleep nor awake. So if you really need rest, put the technology down. Learn to say no. If you want to ask, if you need help, ask someone who's already busy. You're the people to ask. But learn to say no. Take care of yourself, and then you're ready to help again the next time. And spiritually, whatever that means to you, most everybody, and again, this is not religious research, this is secular research. The people who live the longest, healthiest lives have a sense that there is something greater than their small being. And whatever you call that, a higher power or God, spirit, your true self, your inner self, nature, whatever it is, there's incredible support to be found there. So, I would really encourage you, if that's a part of your life, not to neglect it in difficult times. Having some quiet time to yourself every day, doing mindfulness or meditation, yoga, which we've done, we're having sessions of, Tai Chi, just being able to sit quietly and do nothing. If you're a religious person, maybe you can't do something to help somebody else. Maybe you don't have the time or the money, but you have a moment to say a prayer for them. Read something that inspires you, that feeds the values that matter to you. And because all of you are people who want to help, I thought this might be a nice thing to, this beautiful Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things you cannot change the things you can, and have the wisdom to know the difference. And this is one of the best ways to be resilient. You can use this idea just if you're stuck in traffic. You cannot change this. If you're going to be late, you're going to be late, and sitting fuming in the car doesn't change that. And I always like that idea, you're not in traffic, you are the traffic. You're contributing to the problem. So instead of getting angry and blaming everybody else, it's just that acceptance of taking a deep breath and relaxing and going, I can't change this. I'm going to be late. There's nothing I can do. I'm going to relax. I'm going to accept it. So it's a really great way to practice being serene. And I just wanted to end with this. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, let's go together.